number 545. L is difficulty level in a 1d6 scale, which can be derived by changing C number at C2 in the length equation in feet for animals to C number at C3 to compute college credit load at some difficulty level at a particular percent grade, both being at left square bracket left curly bracket, C number cap 2 right curly bracket slash 10 right square bracket. Result can be either left curly bracket L cap L right curly bracket or slash and a two-dimensional array representing credits and X, ladder X used to compute percent or slash and grade by percent grade equals left curly bracket 100 1 and dash 1 X right curly bracket at Y credits, which is Y variable is not the same Y variable in next equation, but credit 1 represents one course, which represents 1d6 courses, depending on how lucky you are slash and unlucky you are, may represent any number of your other attributes. Next, the L on top of the ratio, in algorithm below, is U, while L in the bottom of the ratio is your competition. This is similar to but isn't a die slash dx but is similar to it, where think of dx as a woman for the X chromosome, independent variable, and die as a man, the dependent variable, as an analogy. So, then, when I say the following, I'm jumping a bit ahead of myself. X equals left curly bracket, number of credits, that, right curly bracket equals C3, which has accurate range of left curly bracket, L slash L X right curly bracket, which is worst case scenario to left curly bracket X cap L slash L right curly bracket, which is best case scenario. This can also be viewed or slash and restated in terms of OTC2, in terms of number of credits, without taking that into account, per unit of time, which is usually per semester or slash and per year, as X equals 10 cap left square bracket left curly bracket and D6 slash 1d6 right curly bracket and dash Y right square bracket, where Y equals 1d6 equals level of interest in the subject matter, where higher the number for Y, the less interest in the subject matter, not referring to the female X chromosome, but getting back to what I was saying, for Y, where percent of lack of interest equals left curly bracket 100 11 Y, right curly bracket, where percent of lack of interest equals 50% of Y equals 2. This equation is reduced slash simplified to C2 credits per semester or slash and per year, depending, when attempting to maximize. And, since most people are at tilde or slash and proportional to their C2 in terms of number of credits, semester, this may be or slash and seem trivial, although one might be interested in the arithmetic aspect of how one gets to being at C2 based on his credit load and batting level of difficulty in terms of his slash her courses, where, if her, then she be proportional to her ideal male match, meaning from a male perspective from that of her ideal male match, when computing her credit load, that, and level of difficulty in her courses. This rule number 545 serves as an example for rule number 544. To begin, start with the very simple foundation of my RPG hybrid is based on two equations. Major equation left square bracket X capital O G 10 X right square bracket at C number. Magnitude usually used for point distribution, left square bracket, but can also function in similar manner as its minor sibling equation right square bracket, and its minor sibling, left square bracket X capital N X, right square bracket, which usually used for various types of input and output, most coincidentally and notably used for body stat of champions, hero, where it fluctuates between a factor of 50% to 100% to 200%, within that range. Next, B stat is similar to center of a circle, while LS or lifespan and BL or power level stat are like to foci that of an ellipse. The central stat DB stands for default psyche. Then, start with the assumption that the average professor is OT 16 C2 or 28.18 C3 OT, for AGMS or for average body, mind, soul, abysm RPG. To figure out, understand, or / and solve differential equation, S, by someone with little or / and no math aptitude, one needs to pace himself properly, meaning using his time efficiently in a way that he isn't demoralized into giving up, which can happen to someone with only a few points to play with. To maintain his motivation, he, consciously or / and unconsciously or / and by negative energy, needs to keep in mind and to know his limitation or limitations, which after assuming that someone odd IQ of 138 by left square bracket 10 C1 right square bracket B odd 50 C3 B left square bracket left curly bracket C2 equals C1 cap log 10 C1 right curly bracket cap left curly bracket log 10 left curly bracket C2 equals C1 cap log 10 C1 right curly bracket right square bracket I X capital O G 10 X. Academic limitation or limitations can be computed by 50 cap 2 / 10 equals to 1500 / 10 equals 250, which is then divided by 2 to get 250 over 2 equals 125, which is changed into a two-dimensional matrix, which doesn't have your normal matrix properties, but since it looks like a matrix, why I use the term matrix, which you divide into two component, which you may call the x and y component, the product of which is 125. So, you take the square root of 125, giving you 125 cap 1/2, equals 11 courses that you ought to be able to take for that year, if you start with 50 C3 default psyche. And the reason you used the exponent 2 was because you used two major columns, which in a much previous set of rules, you divide by 2, since you are assumed to be using 2 of the 3 semester during that year. And, by the way, note that the level stat in Aberrant RPG is similar to level stat in Fatal RPG. Both are left square bracket B 10 right square bracket odd C number, where C number equals C2. And the 3 RPGs that have similar RPG mechanics to that my RPG are Abysm, Aberrant, and Champions / Hero, although there are more than several other RPGs that use similar magnitudes for point distribution. That of my RPG, Hybrid, which uses C number, which allows variety of magnitudes for point distribution, ranging from C3, which is commonly used in RPGs, such as Dragon Ball Z, to left square bracket C10 right square bracket, used in non-BOS RPG. The key to figuring the most complicated RPG that I've come across, that being Champions / Hero, which coincidentally uses almost same RPG mechanics that of my RPG, but seems to be paraphrased in a most complicated way rather than in a simple way, which my RPG Hybrid advocates simplicity rather than complexity, which in Hero, Champions, can be reduced to simplicity by focusing on the int, and ego, which is tilde or / and proportional to body, mind, and soul stat. That of Abysm RPG, which is proportional to lifespan, default psyche, and power level. That of my RPG, Hybrid, which is not exactly in that as simple terms, as I've stated, but it is almost what I just stated, but there are some finer details. But getting back to what I was saying, that being Aberrant RPG also has a tri-stat system, similar to my RPG, Hybrid, which also has / uses a tri-stat system, independently discovered without any outside resource or resources, and coincidentally similar to but slightly different from Aberrant, which is inferior to my RPG, Hybrid's tri-stat system, in my opinion, and also, my tri-stat system is superior to that of Abysm and Champions / Hero, which are coincidentally similar to my RPG Hybrid, which is at its core is similar to but slightly different to Aberrant's quantum level and quantum minimum, which latter, referring to the stat minimum, is not what it claimed to be, but a fluctuating with fluctuating properties ranging from body to soul, which in more simple terms is simply either left square bracket plus slash dash minimum plus level right square bracket or at minimum, which equals end result of left square bracket, some number, plus level right square bracket, where it's ironic that I use the term end result, which is what happens in Champions, Hero, using slightly different arithmetic computation to get out the same basic end result, after manipulating level, which coincidentally would be simply or slash and similar to the stat default psyche in my RPG, Hybrid, where level equals left square bracket d slash 10 right square bracket dot C number, where C number equals C2, which can sometimes be dot C1, and other times dot C3. Refer to rule number 3 and 6 for detailed explanation for how they are similar, but in case you cannot find it, it's point manipulation. And as to what C2 is, it's what you get by slash with the computation 20C1 capital OG10 20C1 equals 49.28C2, which is what D20 is based on 20 points of psyche that on the 86 mu DSR RPG, although its psyche stat is not consistent, but it is consistent enough to state it at C1, but few times it is at C2, and at other times it's at difference, which is what you're left with rather than what you start with. Rule number 544. This rule is a simplification of rule number 543, which is simplification of several previous rules from various parts of my this RPG, Hybrid. In this rule, if number of college courses that are taken are similar to each other, it can act as if you're taking only one rather than more than one. This is similar principle used in probability field or fields, info, as well as cloning technology, using same principle. Keep in mind to reduce result from ratio in algorithm in next sentence to maximize efficiency in getting the best grade for college course or courses for that time unit, for averages semester, to maximize one's potential for that subject matter, based on the observation that the velocity equation in miles per hour for TL seems to be proportional to number of college a person can take based on number of points that he has, where you can use the ratio, left curly bracket, C3 cap 2 right curly bracket, left curly bracket, C3 cap 2 right curly bracket to figure out number of courses that he'll be able to finish. His maximum potential can be determined depending on two factors. For this, think of I/dx, which serves as an analogy for this. His C3 be in the top part of the fraction, while his competition will ought to be in the bottom part of the fraction. But when reverse this, you end up with a major delay in completing the course or courses or and getting less than what you'd like to get in terms of a grade, giving number of courses for him. If your C3 is less or and significantly less than the competition, the left curly bracket, C3 cap 2 right curly bracket is also maximum velocity in miles per hour for TL. Those with the fewest number of points. This rule can be rewritten in following three ways, depending on how fair or and unfair his professor is, as well as the difficulty level of the book assigned by professor. Grade, percent, equals 100, left curly bracket 11 / x cap r right curly bracket, where notice that when r equals 1, the equation changes to grade, percent, equals 100, left curly bracket 11 x right curly bracket, where r equals rating, where x equals number of units of time, when r equals 1 for most unfair. But the same equation for math at r equals 0.5 changes the equation to grade, percent, equals 100, left curly bracket 1-1 / x cap dot 5, right curly bracket, where r at 0.5 is more than unfair. But keep in mind that this is for someone with few points, so this equation becomes diluted with more the person has. Example for which is in rule number 545, simplified version of rule number 543, where after assuming its zero coordinate is odd L equals 4, where L equals difficulty level for odd R equals 1, such as physics, where, if L equals 5 rather than 4, then change exponent from left square bracket cap to right square bracket to left square bracket cap 1/2 right square bracket. If odd R equals 1 for most unfair, then use time unit number of years. Next, odd R equals to 4 fair, such as odd L equals 3, then use time unit number of months. And odd R equals 3 for to fair that it almost seems like cheating, such as odd L equals 2, then use time unit number of weeks, / of how fair the course, professor, and the books are / and seem to be. And do not confuse R with the variable L in the previous equation in rule number 543, which work in similar principles, but is a different way of looking at and solving the same problem, as in this rule number 544, to determine number of courses one ought to take, as well as difficulty level, as well percent of success and grade. You can also use this to make a nuclear bomb at price of a beer can. Easier said than done to complete. In terms of the amount of effort needed to get a job done using as few stats as possible, numbering within 3 plus / 1 with units of magnitude left square bracket C number right square bracket 4-point distribution at C number, which is the main purpose of this RPG, which is to discuss my RPG hybrid, where the simple recursive properties of my RPG is in some way or in an abstract way, similar to that of a fractal, but a fractal that acts as a role-playing game, which would make my RPG hybrid the first RPG that is both a fractal and an RPG. To understand this RPG, think of someone solving or not being able to solve a Rubik cube is or has properties or / and characteristics that of a fractal with attractors. If you can picture this abstract analogy, which works best for my RPG hybrid, when C number is less than or / and greater than 10, which is analogous to value of 1 in the fractal world, in terms of how both work, but not directly or / and indirectly proportional, other than how small changes can make big impact, the butterfly effect. Then you will be better able to understand my interpretation, S, which tries to mimic reality, in terms of the amount of effort needed to get a job or something done, for my RPG was and is created to be easy. And, also, there will be no links, since in previous version, where the several links that I had put inside my RPG slowed down my editing of this RPG to a pace of a snail, while the links were removed in this faster versions, with no links. It's 4% indecent and 96% decent. What this RPG hybrid does is reveal how much effort is needed to get something done, or how many points is needed to get something done. Although points in various forms from stats left square bracket 3 plus / 1, different than those of GURPS, although the stats of GURPS left square bracket is 4 stats, although not directly used, but are in the background, like a shadow or shadows, but most of the time, these 4 stats do not really do anything in this RPG, other than serve as background, which in an abstract way is like a shadow. But the significant and perhaps real substance of this RPG is a completely different set of stats, more fundamental and more basic and much more powerful in explaining reality. In my opinion, right square bracket to units of magnitude, which will be discussed later. Less effort, the more points an object or / and person has, as well as the more points an object or / and person has, the more complex task that object or / and person can do, using the starting fundamental major equation x capital O G 10 x, and its minor sibling equation x capital N x, which reality in my RPG is based on, but at the same time, more, which may sound contradictory, but isn't, if you think about it, meaning it works similar to the work function, similar to your intro to physics. and part of the focus will be to create an equation or an algorithm to create a nuclear bomb at the price of a beer can. So, if I accidentally sound pretentious, then I ought to apologize, for I would not wish to sound nor portray myself as pretentious as the person or persons that created the French Revolution, due to a number of factions left square bracket 5, if you exclude the monarchy, and 6, if you include the monarchy, but the French monarchy wasn't aware of the power struggle, until it was too late, during the 1790s, which was started in the 1780s, a microscopic version of the Nazi Party during the 1930s, where the mass murder, a very evil and bad thing, took place, when only 1 in 1,000 Jews were evil, a similar ratio, where politicians get $1 for every $1,000 they steal from taxpayers and give to the ultra-rich and their corporations and companies, while the rest, 999 out of every 1,000 Jews before we die, were innocent of being traitors, starting 1940, mass murder rather than weeding out the 0.1% that were evil, since the other 99.9% of the Jews were innocent, if you exclude their Jewish practice to circumscribe the male penis of its skin, which is about as bad as making anti-Semitic statements or and commentary. But abortion is also bad, except in certain particular circumstances, excluding use of birth control pills, which are okay for women to use birth control pills, assuming she isn't trying to be with every guy she can be with, sometimes for purpose of $, such as prostitution or and its opposite abstinence to drive up the price for sex. It seems most laws can be abused, if one is not vigilant, then turning around and asking for alimony or and palimony or and child support from the guy that gets her pregnant is not right, especially if she's not planning to marry him, or and if she isn't loyal to a man, for she ought to be stuck with the expenses, if she can't be loyal to a man, and the construction of the death camps probably began after 1936, but the percent completion of such plans was still due to the nuclear bomb technology being built in USA at the time, right square bracket, where these competing factions, competing for power, and yes, one of the factions consisted of Jews, meaning the Jewish factions, probably wanting their loans paid off, which the French monarchy bankrupted themselves trying to pay for the American Revolution, which was probably financed by the Jewish faction wanted democracy, not for freedom, but for purpose of corrupting hiring politicians, which are easier to corrupt, and divert freedom toward a police state, which would, they'd like to, eventually, they wish, be run by the Jewish factions, which is mainly concerned about $ in banking and media, which they advocate to create controversy then reduce freedom of press, if when it looks like things are not going their way, as always, not to be nor portray myself as anti-Semitic, since I like the language, but not its parts of its culture, which seem to play too much importance on $ banking, and control of the media. They seem to be center of some sort of conspiracy, including in Russia a century later, towards the end of the 19th century and start of the 20th century. Their influence seemed to be everywhere, for a small minority seemed to rule quarter of the planet by $ in banking and media, where the commoners were pawns, causing a power struggle. But whether the people choose to have a democratic dictatorship or monarchy by a royal bloodline or a combination of the two, either way, you would still have some sort of dictatorship, consisting of some sort of the feudal system, which is difficult to get rid of, but I'm digressing onto some off-topic. But one big question I haven't been able to answer is that, are people able to come up with same or similar idea, in their own, or must it be connected somehow? For Dr. Doom, in Dr. Doom 2099 new issue, said that there is no such thing as chance or coincidence, which is what probability theory depends on, coincidence. So then the new Dr. Doom must not believe in probability, meaning that almost no event is disconnected no matter how remote. The process of discovery or the discovering process, does it create a circular timeline? And how circular is our timeline or timelines, and how much can it deviate from what is predestined? And does reality try to create a destiny for itself, even if it means to create a circular timeline? I answer these questions by noticing similarities in my ideas and ideas of others. A good example of my ideas left square bracket, what seemed to be right square bracket, being paraphrased and perhaps stolen, left square bracket, although I could wrong, if it is a coincidence, right square bracket, before I have chance to discover it is that part of Champions/Hero, where it say to spend and to reduce cost of powers seem to be paraphrased form of my RPG mechanic based on my rule number 3 and 6, which I came with first, before I read and discovered this rule of mine, being, it seems or seemed to me, paraphrased by Champions and Hero, although it could be a coincidence. But there are coincidences in dozen different RPGs seem to be like patchwork of my RPG, fragments of my RPG, like a giant jigsaw puzzle, the whole puzzle being something similar to my incomplete RPG hybrid. My stat LS or lifespan is referred to as end in Champions and Hero, while it's referred to as body stat in Bism RPG. At first, I wasn't impressed by the end stat, which I read about, after I discovered or created a similar version of it using my LS or lifespan stat, but the way end was defined, it wasn't impressing, and I went about working on my LS stat, only to later discover that Champions seem to have used a variant version of my rules using the end stat, before I discovered it, in the form of LS or lifespan. And, at the time, before I discovering it independently, but only to discover that a variant version of my rules was already being used by Champions/Hero, which seemed to have, it seems, due to the similarity, if one were to analyze it in my RPG, which is superior to Champions/Hero, which is flawed, in my opinion, as are most RPGs, which seem like fragment or fragments of my RPG hybrid, which by pure coincidences are and seem to be entirety of all the best RPGs, by pure coincidence, unless it's more than mere coincidence, but then I'd be theorizing reasons for it, and explanation or explanations are beyond any average scientific explanation, but not necessarily impossible, but might sound like science fiction. As for the similarities between these dozen RPGs and my incomplete RPG hybrid, or it's a coincidence that it seemed to me, paraphrased version of my ideas in such a complicated way, that I at first assumed it was a different concept, until it occurred to me one day, that it was or seemed to be based on my idea of rule number 3 and 6, so, figuratively speaking, meaning, I didn't think anything of it when I first read my first RPG, the 86 Mutinous RPG, why I came up with the LS or lifespan stat, but only to discover that a variant version of my LS stat was already discovered in Champions Hero RPG, as in, until recently, I noticed similarity between it and my LS stat, when it came to point manipulation to increase certain aspect of points left square bracket points that I refer to as /4PL or power level in my RPG right square bracket. That part of my RPG is sometimes referred to as active points in Champions Hero. That part of that RPG PL is referred to as soul stat in Bism RPG to generate powers. If it was Dr. Doom, he might think someone was using your / and stealing his ideas. So, is my RPG maybe result of some missing points? Not sure. If it, my discovering process is like the effects of the Green Goblin's missing one atoms, meaning the movie, by Stan Lee, tries to implies to things that the Green Goblin is of 6 atoms, but it also implies that he is of 7 atoms. But Spider-Man is of 7 atoms and 1, which should have ended in stalemate, so the Green Goblin used inefficiently his last 1 abs, referring to his abs between 6 and 7 points inefficiently used by the Green Goblin. What the audience might think of as schizophrenia, but it as really a time travel power stunt in part of the Green Goblin is possible. If he was at 7 abs, else he'd have to reduce his human alter ego to 5 abs to create that same effect of schizophrenia. With the Green Goblin having 6 abs, do or does not mean to imply that anyone with schizophrenia has a missing 1 abs, but to explain the new character the Green Goblin. But, according to my math equation, I seem to be missing 1 abs, referring to my ideas showing up everywhere, before I have a chance to discover them, trying to figure out how or and why or if it's just a mere chance coincidence or series of coincidences, probability. But, do not confuse this with boy version of Doctor Doom during Secret War 3 or 4, when the boy Doctor Doom was 1 unit less than the real Doctor Doom. So whatever C1 the real Doctor Doom was at, then the boy Doctor Doom was at C2 but, as I was saying earlier, not sure, and I don't know if it's destiny or what, but my RPG is best, and my ideas are appearing everywhere, especially in RPGs, but not limited to there, or it could be a coincidence or series of coincidences, like probability field or fields is what I notice. Before you call or think of my diatribes as nonsense or that of a pretentious gamer, read articles in Maxwell's equation of time travel to get a better glimpse into what likely, and how it's likely. Although the plot behind most Godzilla movie is Einstein's relativity left square bracket not referring to the atomic bomb, which is only a very tiny fragment of it, but FTL to be more exact near light speed, where velocity is at maximum value of left square bracket, C3 cap 2 right square bracket in miles per hour, for object at size C3, which can sometimes be replaced by C number comma, depending on how you define the parameters of the object and its points right square bracket, although most of the audience isn't aware of it, far as I know, since they are seem too busy memorizing RPG rules, like a computer, without understanding what is it they are memorizing, and I'm not sure if Einstein's theory is even original, but if you read Maxwell's equation of time travel or the various interpretations of it, which involves radio waves and electrons and the electromagnetic spectrum as well as perhaps gravity, will help you understand the nature of my diatribes, excluding my anti-feminist stance but rather referring to my RPG mechanics, which seem to be paraphrased by others and published before I discover them, and maybe because of it I notice coincidences of my ideas appearing everywhere, as a result of noticing coincidences of my ideas appearing in places. My RPG, my incomplete RPG, is so great that it seems people, including various RPGs, it seems, as just, when I invent create discover an idea, it's already been, parts of it, my idea or ideas, paraphrased and appeared somewhere else, in some form or another, go out of their way to steal my ideas, before I discover them, or it's a coincidence that my ideas pop up everywhere I look and read. The only thing better than my RPG is sex with a spouse/lover. I'm no good in math, but I have lots of good ideas. I read somewhere that, before reality was created, reality scanned itself of various alternate futures, and picked one, which is ours. This one, seemed to me, parts of it. Why I say that my RPG is incomplete, greatly incomplete, seem to be partly based according to my ideas, but why would, fraction of, reality pick my ideas, when I'm no good in math? I do not mean to sound in any way pretentious nor be pretentious, but my RPG is the best RPG in the world, although greatly incomplete, and although I now say it's 24.8% complete, it's a lot more incomplete than that, but since my host wants the percent to increase, but I try to decrease percent, whenever I can, since my RPG is greatly incomplete, and my RPG hybrid won't be finished in my lifetime, since I'm no good in math, and my intuition can only take me so far in discovering laws of physics without any math, since I'm no good in math, but got a good intuition, which isn't all that great, since I have only few points, so it's very limited, even if it's accurate. But parts of my RPG is similar to other RPGs, as if dozens of people it seems to have stole ideas from me before I discovered them, meaning I'm assuming this timeline is circular, partly circular, but not entirely nor completely circular, like in time travel movies, which seem to have taken my idea or ideas or parts of my idea or ideas before I had chance to discovered it/them, referring to my ideas, which seem to appear everywhere, especially in RPGs, including naming of military weapons, unless the people who name them based on my C3 unit, which is points used in Dungeons and Dragons, which in a C1 scale would be your D20, which on C2 is your points in Primal Order RPG, it seems, or how else could my ideas appear in them? But it could be a coincidence or a series of coincidences, but then few people say that my ideas are no good, then turn around and use them. When I see that, I feel like the Three Stooges, wondering what's going on. The disclaimer: anything you find offensive in my RPG is not directed at anyone, tries to be accurate. And also, any similarity in my RPG and in any other is by pure coincidence, such as 69 and 96 symbols. The following two links below should take you somewhere else in my RPG, which is 3/4, incomplete. And do not or try not to be offended by my diatribes, which are throughout my incomplete RPG hybrid and dash the most simple and best RPG, which I update whenever I can find a more efficient way of doing things that is theoretical, but without changing any of the original premises, which are assumed to be correct, although there is always the possibility that a tiny fraction of my rules are faulty or/and in need of correction, such as accidentally writing XY rather than YX. And this free RPG of mine hybrid contains 4% offensive material, which might be offensive to some people, but it's 96% dissent. The version number will temporarily go down to E0.21, since it and dash my RPG hybrid and dash is currently up to 0.1 megabytes long, and then up later, as the size of this RPG grows slowly over time, which for the time being seemed to have reached its peak at rule number 543. What I write here is meant as material for science fiction RPG hybrid. And my RPG hybrid is not based on other RPGs, but fragments of my RPG will seem or appear similar to other RPGs, but when that happens it's by pure coincidence. But this greatest RPG, in my opinion, is my RPG hybrid, based on X capital OG10, X C number, which is one of a dozen equations, each as important as the other. And when I notice an small error in my RPG or/and find a more efficient way of handling something, it does not mean that my RPG is faulty, but means that my RPG is incomplete and needs more work and fine-tuning, but far from being complete. The version number will be left square bracket left curly bracket year 1990 plus /3 cap 1/1d6 equals 3 right curly bracket /10 right square bracket 1d6 was equals 2. The version number will be left square bracket its memory in megabytes /10 right square bracket equals MBGA10. If all police had the morals and ethics of Captain America, then the police would get lot more respect, but often I see on TV is police acting as thugs, info, which now sometimes even includes animal cops, who sometimes unfairly seize animals. They ought to be stopping the making and selling of most kinds of candies left square bracket, which is different from pastry, which contain much less sugar than candies, but still contain sugar, which ought to be avoided by the consumer or consumers, except in rare circumstances, such as on birthday, if they choose to buy and eat a cake, which ought to contain less sugar or and ought to be diluted with more or and excess flour, diluting the sugar in the cake, which usually contains excess sugar, since excess sugar is not something anyone ought to promote, which is often promoted by candy companies and manufacturers, most of which is harmful or ought to be closing down stores or and factories that sell promote candies, such as those that they promote for children, which seem like child abuse, if children are consumers of these candies, with no label that it's harmful, but they label tobacco as being harmful, but tobacco, harmful, but is less harmful than candies, which they have no problem over but cry foul for other forms of child abuse, but seem to have no problem for this kind of child abuse by feeding them excess sugar, which is form of child abuse, imho. But what do they do instead? The police harass people. Reign of terror is what it is in some of the cases, such as few of the recent episodes of Animal Cops aren't even abuse cases, but these poor person or persons get fined and imprisoned, where in one such case, one woman, not sure how sane she is, decides to throw her husband out and live with her dog, which gets thrown out by her husband, who gets charged with animal cruelty, where the woman/wife ought to be charged with adultery with the dog, but the guy, her husband, gets arrested for animal cruelty, where only in this partly insane country that is called USA can something stupid like that would and likely to happen, which, if that isn't case for abuse of power and police state, then I don't want is. Although animal may possess some human characteristics, they are still not human, which some animal fanatics do not seem to realize, and spend so much excess $on animal or animals, that it is might seem unbelievable. And, although I may be digressing from discussing my RPG, but in my opinion, people need to draw a clear line between rights of animals and humanoid life forms, which are anything that is humanoid in nature has or ought to have more rights than anything that isn't humanoid. Not that animals ought to be mistreated, no, but they aren't humans, either. The Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution was created for humans and not for animals. And, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, these animal cops seem like animal fanatics, just like cops on TV episodes of Cops, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, seem like fanatics, violating civil rights of humans. And, cops are and government ought to, in my opinion, be putting an end to the excesses in the sugar industry. And what about all the illegal immigrants? Not that it's a bad thing, regarding illegal immigration, considering the lands of USA were stolen from others, so I don't know what to think about these illegal immigrants from Mexico in the tens of millions, not sure what to think of their illegal immigration, since it seems condoned, as long as it's Mexicans, for purpose of cheap labor, but then that same right of immigration ought to be given to others, nationals, as well. To be fair, why not then create open borders for all countries, not just the Mexican-USA border? But I'm digressing again, but they ought to be honest about what they are doing or and plan to do, rather than trying to arrest every person that wants to smoke marijuana, not that I have, which I have not, although I was asked to once, but chose not to do so, since it was illegal, chose not to do so. Seem to me, too cowardly to rebel against the police state. Effort would seem to be total waste of resources, as well as total abuse of power by the American USA, which has been headed for police state since USA got its independence from the British Empire. It seems that the feudal system has not gone away. Government. And note that the sugar in my brownie recipe is not good for you is a disclaimer, since excess sugar is harmful, bad as any illegal drug out there, but why sugar is legal, which is a mystery, but not a complete mystery, For there is lot of corruption in government, which is bribed by the sugar industry to keep it legal, and making of brownies can be diluted with some or lots of extra flour. And also, maybe, regarding my next comment, which I don't believe, since I think we're still living in a feudal system, but we just don't know it, because most people are brainwashed. But reality is often opposite of what we're told, although trolls like to create false arguments which they can win. But, getting back to my next comment, which I don't believe, since I think we're still living in a feudal system. But as to why I made the comment, not sure. But, getting back to my next comment, the only thing keeping the American government and its police from being as bad as the Nazi prevention is the U.S. Constitution. In the absence of good leadership, but in the presence of good leadership, you don't need the U.S. Constitution, which is only required in the absence of good leadership, which would imply that U.S. government doesn't trust itself. If it needs the USA Constitution to function properly, which is a pretty fine/thin line between good and evil, which both, the former and the latter, are symptoms of probability field or fields. But, what is our probability field or fields? Why do I mention this in a role-playing game? I'm not an expert in probability field or fields, which I only know the fundamental principle that a likely event will likely happen, but there is no guarantee that it will happen, and vice versa, where an unlikely event will unlikely happen, but there is no guarantee that it will not happen, such as, for example, the US wanted to nuke Southeast Asia for trying to turn communist, since the American merchant class liked to maximize their profit and communism left square bracket mentioned by Nostradamus right square bracket and other forms of socialism interferes with that, including the US Constitution interferes with monopoly of power. Why the merchant class likes to bypass the U.S. Constitution, since it would reduce profit, but U.S. never got the opportunity to nuke Southeast Asia, due to the interference from China, which wasn't much of a threat to U.S., but China was backed by Russia, which was a threat to USA. A similar scenario, except on the USA side, took place before the Gulf War, where Kuwait was backed by USA. Why Kuwait was emboldened to piss off Iraq. Why Iraq declared war on Kuwait, which was part of Iraq until 1899, but was split by Britain for purpose of getting its oil. The stratagem of divide and conquer, which USA likes to often do by starting civil wars in other countries. Half the planet was/is victim of USA imperialism, which you won't hear about it in the news, such as, in the 20th century, the recent Yugoslavian civil war or wars was financed by some greedy rich guy or guys, a billionaire guy or guys in USA, who wanted to collect more negative energy, with help from his lackey friends, also rich, but not as rich, probably in the millionaire and less status range, but clandestinely participated, to make the country and its government unstable to buy up properties at cheap price, who wanted the valuable mines in Yugoslavia, which didn't want to sell it to him, but he tried to take it by force by starting a civil war there, hoping he could, secretly, set up a puppet government which would sell him the mineral or whatever was it that was worth billions of dollars mines which he wanted to buy. The same kind of scenario that the Federation in Star Trek likes to often do to get their dilithium crystals. Amazing coincidence or coincidences or / and similarities. And the second, false, aspect of probability field, S, left square bracket, which is really just an inaccurate explanation of the actual cause, whatever that might be, since I'm no expert, but right square bracket is that it, we are told, like everything else we are told to believe, governs laws of physics and chemistry which we've been brainwashed to think and believe is governed by laws of chance and probability, sort of like every other theory that preceded it, only to have it recanted later. And, well, a lot of people want to role-play a superhero, but don't have the foggiest clue as to what a superhero is or about. Most comic / cartoon superheroes pretend to be a superhero, with ulterior motive or motives, or outright commit crimes, then solve it left square bracket in a similar manner of the USA government, which is rarely ever questioned for its acts, since most people are too patriotic left square bracket, which, for some people, is like a drug, and has little to do with either common sense or and morality right square bracket to question the morality of its government right square bracket just to be popular or put out the competition, which is I would not call being heroic but more like acts of villainy, nor make any politically incorrect commentary or and statements, since it's in a forum format, regarding RPGs, usually in the same culture, as majority rule, which isn't role-playing, but, perhaps, a form of masturbation, in my opinion. Then, when people attempt to actually role-play a role-playing game, some of them act like they're in an opium den, while others hack and in politically correct manner at politically correct foes that they would in the real world, or and sit around and either make idle chit-chat or have romance or and sex, while in the real world they may have an actual spouse or sexual partner, which might not be the person they are role-playing romance or sex in the internet, which I would not advocate it that, since that might be adultery, nor group sex, mild form of which going to a nightclub and dancing with your lover, and I would not condone sharing partners, even the thought of it is repugnant, as to the role-playing aspect, but do not actually do any left square bracket even in a pretend world right square bracket crime fighting, even in an imaginary world, but seem interested in only having super powers or positions of status, like being members of the Avengers, or try to be slightly more than ordinary, but not actually do anything, in terms of crime fighting, which in itself is and may be very subjective, often abused by those with power or powers, by the very people whom they trust, but sometimes I blame the citizens, since it is citizens that put those people in power. So, what is role-playing? But, note that most male members of the Justice League are evil, including Superman and Spider-Man, and have better PR than the villains. And, do not forget, that Stan Lee starting working for DC before Marvel, it's an experiment by Stan Lee, in my opinion, to see if the unwary audience can detect supervillains, to see if anyone can be brainwashed, by dividing supervillains into two categories, honest supervillains and dishonest supervillains. The latter dishonest supervillains would be superheroes, with a better PR in a similar manner that the citizens of the Nazi government did its citizens, except in a more clandestine way, for Stan Lee is very sneaky. The second part of the experiment is to show how Doppler effect and resonance theory can be used to generate mutant power or powers by difference, if there is potential for it, then by Rule 3 and Rule number 6 and manipulating quantum field or fields. You will notice a similar pattern, in my opinion, created by Steve Long, except on a much smaller scale, except he doesn't say that Hero RPG is based on D20, which is based on 20-point psyche and from the 86 mu DSR RPG, which is missing all units of magnitude, which I've created, such as the OD20C1DB and my Tristat system, at about the same time as BISM, towards end of the 1990s, a race which I didn't win, but I think my RPG was and is superior to that of BISM. But except BISM RPG published it before me, although I came up with my Tristat system in my own, independently without any outside resource, just as I've discovered equation for velocity for TL flight by left square bracket, C3BL cap 2 right square bracket, in N.P.H, and many other equations. My Tristat system is based on lifespan, default psyche, and power level, which I refer to as LSDB and BL, which is part of the core foundation of my RPG, along with the equation X capital OG10X, which partly governs point manipulation, by juxtaposing it with conservation of mass and energy using arithmetic operations in L, S, and B. L. Both start off at default, sort of like a center of a circle, which change to foci of an ellipse, where L, S, and B, L are like a pair of wings, which likewise in reality start off at default, but branch off when put into flight. The second major equation is x capital and x, rarely ever used, but is used in, for something for which I had no term of it, but later I would refer to it as body, for lack of a better term, but a term from Hero RPG, and not the term in Bism RPG, and is also used in work output, such as in terms of mass of a bridge or volts. My LS stat is close to being similar to the body stat in Bism RPG, but I did not get idea from Bism RPG. The similarities are pure coincidences, such as my C3 unit, which come out to total 4 in several 7 RPGs, such as in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is at C3BL, while creators of the monsters, Psychic Kids, with the pieces of the Millennium Puzzle at default Psyche, but can also be at power level, but at cost of reducing his lifespan.